Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to the True Crime Lounge. Today, we're going to be starting a new series, and it's going to be called Don't Drink the Kool-Aid. If you could tell me in the comments who said that, you have a thumbs up from me. Um, you're probably wondering, if you're new here, if you're new to True Crime and all that, what Don't Drink the Kool-Aid means. Well, I'm going to explain that to you. But for real though, if you are new here, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. And we will get started. This is going to be, hopefully, I'm going to go for a 4-part series. I'm going to try not to make it as long as the Charles Manson, which you can go back and check out. So, why don't we get started? So, if you have guessed Jim Jones, you are correct when we say don't drink the Kool-Aid. But you're probably wondering, who in the world is Jim Jones? Like, I know I heard this name before, and Jim and Jones is a very common name. But why don't we get started? Let me tell you who he is, what he's done, and we'll go on with the series. He is classified as a murderer. He is the founder of the People's Temple group of which was mass suicide by poison. He had over 900 victims, and the date of his murders happened on November 18, 1978. He was born May 13, 1931, and his victimology includes men, women, and children. In the location, Jamestown, Guyana. What's the status? Well, he died from a gunshot wound to the head that same very day. So, what about the FBI Jonestown files? Well, on November 18, 1978, Congressman Leo J. Ryan was shot and killed in Guyana, along with 4 other individuals. Congressman Ryan was visiting Jonestown for the purpose of conducting congressional inquiry into the activity of the People's Temple and Reverend Jim Jones. The FBI investigated the murder under the code name Weimer. In 1986, Lawrence John Layton was found guilty in a U.S. District Court in Northern District of California of several federal violations, including conspiracy to murder a congressman. James Warren Jim Jones was the American founder of the People's Temple, and which became synonymous with group suicide after November 18, 1978. Mass suicide by poison in their isolated agricultural intentional community called Jamestown. This was located in the country of Guyana. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name up, guys. I'm terrible with names. And Jones was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head from among 909 corpses there. So what about the early life of Jim Jones? Clearly we gotta be thinking, this guy wasn't born a complete psycho to start a cult and all of that now. Well, let's see. Well, he was born in Lynn, Indiana to Lynetta Putman and Jane Sturman Jones, where he graduated high school at Richmond High in Richmond, Indiana. He became a preacher in the 1950s and obtained a bachelor's degree from Butler University in 1961, and after graduate school from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, Jim sold pet monkeys door to door to raise the money to fund his church that would be named Wings of Deliverance. Well, if the name works, it works. He later named the church People's Temple, located in Indianapolis, where he gained respectability, in which he became an ordained minister in 1964. The mainstream Christian denomination, Disciples of Christ. The church was exceptional for equal treatment of African Americans and many of them became members of the church. He started to struggle with racial equality and social justice, and was dubbed the in which he dubbed apostolic socialism. Jones authored a booklet called The Letter Kill-It, which pointing out that he felt there were contradictions, absurdities, and atrocities in the Bible. But the booklet also stated that the Bible gained great truth. So he claimed to be an incarceration of Jesus, Akhenaten, Buddha, Lenin, and the Father Divine. Members of Jones' church were called Jones' Father and believed their movement was the solution to the problems with the justice, and many did not distinguish Jones from the movement. The group was gradually moved away from mainstream. So what about Jonestown and the mass suicide? Well, in the summer of '77, Jones and most of 1,000 members of People's Temple moved to Guyana from San Francisco after an investigation to the church for tax evasion was begun. Well, Jones named a close settlement in Jonestown after himself. Pretty much a narcissist, maybe. But, not all narcissists name towns after themselves, though. His intention was to create an agricultural utopia in the jungle free from racism and based on quasi-communist principles. People who had left the organization prior to his move to Guyana told the authorities of the brutal beatings, murders, and mass suicide plan, but were not believed. In spite of the tax evasion allegation, Jones was still widely respected for setting up racially mixed churches, which helped the disadvantaged. Around 70% of the inhabitants of Jonestown were black and impoverished. The religious scholar Mary McCormick Maga argued that Jones' authority waned after he moved to the isolated commune because he was not needed anymore for recruitment, and he could not hide his drug addiction from rank and file members. Consequently, he lost some of his power to inner circle members. Then, in November 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan led a fact-finding mission to the Jonestown settlement in Guyana after allegations for relatives in the U.S. of human rights abuse. Ryan's delegation arrived in Jonestown on November 15th and spent 3 days interviewing residents. They left hurriedly the morning of Saturday, November 18th, after an attempt was made on Ryan's life. They took some roughly 15 Temple's members who wished to leave. Delegation members later told police as they were boarding the airstrip a truckload of Jones. Sorry guys, I keep getting spam emails. But, at the same time, one of the supposed members, Larry Layton, drew a weapon and began to fire at members of the party. When the gunman left, 6 people were dead. Representative Ryan, Don Humphrey, and a reporter from NBC, a cameraman from NBC, a newspaper photographer, and one of the defectors from the People's Temple. The former California State Senator Jackie Spear, a staff member for Rep. Ryan, in 1978, Richard Dyer, the Deputy Chief of Missions from the U.S. Embassy in Georgetown, and allegedly an officer in the CIA and a producer of Embassy News, Bob Flick, survived the attack. Later that day, around 913 of the remaining inhabitants of Jonestown, 276, were children. Let that sink in now. died in what was commonly labeled as a mass suicide, although many who had died were murdered. While some of the followers obeyed Jones' instructions to commit revolutionary suicide by drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid grape-flavored aid, often misconstrued as Kool-Aid. Hence how we get the saying, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid." Others died by force and cyanide injection by shooting. Jones was found dead and sitting in his chair with a gunshot wound to his head. Although it is unknown if he had been murdered or committed suicide, an autopsy of his body showed levels of barbiturate and pentobarbital that could have lethal to humans and develop psychological tolerance. His drug usage included various LSD and marijuana experimentation, was drank by his son, Stefan, and Jones' doctor in San Francisco. So, what about the other issues that were going on? Well, Jones was married to Marceline Jones. Together they had 2 sons together, one biological and one adopted. Their biological son, Stephen Gandhi Jones, did not take part in the mass suicide because he was away playing with the People's Temple basketball team in a game against the Guyanese national team. Jones' adopted son, Jim Jones Jr., was African American. Jim and Marceline were the first white couple in Indiana to adopt the first African American child. Jones claimed to be the biological father of John Victor Stohan, who was the legal son of Grace Stohan and her husband, Timothy Stohan. The custody dispute over Stohan had a great symbolic value for the People's Temple, intensified with the conflict, as its opponents, who consisted of among members of a group called Concerned Relatives. Marcelo and Jim Jones' son Stephen is today a businessman and family man, married with 3 children of his own. He appeared in the recent documentary Jonestown, Paradise Lost, which aired in the U.S. on the History Channel. He states that he won't watch the film, as he does not mourn his father, only his mother, Marcelo Jones. In MacArthur Park, Los Angeles, on December 1973, Jones was arrested and charged with soliciting a man for sex in a movie theater bathroom known for homosexual sexual activity. The man, as it turns out, was an undercover Los Angeles police department vice officer. Jones is on record in later telling the followers the only true heterosexual, but he was the only true heterosexual. But at least one account exists where he's sexually abusing male members of his congregation, and one of the following ostensibly to prove that the man's own homosexual tendencies. One source of inspiration of the controversial cult leader, Father Divine, Jones had borrowed terms of revolutionary suicide from the Black Panther leader, Huey Newton, and had argued the slow decline of life in the ghetto ought to be replaced by revolutionary struggle that would only end in victory, socialism, and self-determination, or revolutionary suicide, death. So what about the literature at this time? Well, Jonestown was the commune settlement that made the northwestern Guyana by the People's Temple, a cult from California. Jonestown was founded in the mid-70s. So, by Jones. So, for whom it is named, but occupied for only a few years, it stood amidst jungle amongst 7 miles southwesternly of Port Kaituma. Jonestown gained lasting international notoriety in '78 when he nearly its whole population died of mass suicide ordered by Jones. Jones himself was among the slain, numbering somewhat 900 men, women, and children. The place was promptly abandoned and collapsing in the remnants of the People's Temple. Afterwards, it was the first tender for Guyanese government, which allowed reoccupation of the Hmong refugees from Laos from the few years in the early 80s, but it has since although been deserted. So, let's talk about this origin, do you think maybe, before I get into this, he probably is you know what, I think I'm going to start a cult. Was it the drugs, maybe, that helped influence him? I don't know. But, according to the origin, it was founded in Indianapolis during the mid-1950s. In the 60s, his congregation was dwindled to fewer than 100 members and was on the verge of collapse. Jones managed to secure affiliation with the Disciples of Christ, and the new association bolstered the temple's reputation, increased the membership, and Jones' influence. Beginning in '65, Jones and about 80 followers moved to Red Valley in Mendocino County, California, where they believed they would have a safe return from a nuclear fallout on nuclear attacks in the States. In '72, Jones moved his congregation to San Francisco and opened another church where, while in San Francisco, Jones had changed his political image from anti-communism to socialist, vocally supporting prominent political candidates, which was appointed by the city commission, and making grants to the newspapers, in which he stated in supporting the First Amendment. Partly inspired by the eccentric preacher Father Divine, he began charity efforts with a goal of recruiting the poor. So after several scandals and investigations for the tax invasion, Jones began planning a relocation of the temple. According to the American Journal of Economics and Sociology, he considered locations in California and Brazil before settling in Guyana. And he was leased over 3,800 acres of jungle from the Guyanese government. So soon, members of the People's Temple began construction of Jonestown under the supervision of temple members. Jonestown went back to California before it encouraged all of his followers in 1997. Jonestown population increased from 50 members to 1977, into which to more than 900 at its peak in '78. So, okay, we have Jonestown established now. So let's talk about it for a minute. Many of the People's Temple members believe that Guyana would, as Jones promised, paradise. Instead, most of the residents, including children, ended up raising food and animals for the People's Temple agricultural project. But the work was performed 6 days a week and 7 days in the morning to 6 in the evening, with temperatures often 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In Guyana's equator climate. According to some, meals from the members consisted of nothing more than rice and beans, in which Jones dined on eggs, meat, and soft drinks from a private refrigerator separate from others. Medical problems such as severe diarrhea and huge fevers half the community in February '78, according to New York copious amounts of drugs such as Starzine, sodium pentanol, chloral hydrate, Demerol, and Valium were administered to Jonestown, and with detailed records of being kept of each person's drug regimen. Jonestown residents claim they were administered to control the behavior. Well, various forms of punishment were used. They were considered to be seriously disciplinary problems. Methods included imprisonment in a 6x4 by 3 foot plywood box, and forcing children to spend a night at the bottom of a well, sometimes upside down. Members attempted to run away and were drugged to the point of incapacitation. Armed guards patrolled the compound and night to enforce the obedience of Jones. Children surrendered to communal care, addressed Jones as dad, and were only allowed to real parents briefly at night. Jones was also called father and dad by the adults as well. Up to $65,000 in monthly welfare payments to Jonestown residents were appropriated by Jones, whose own wealth was estimated at least $26 million. Local Guyanese includes police official related stories of harsh beatings in a torture hole, a well into which Jones had misbehaving children thrown into in the middle of the night. Jones had terrified the children by making them believe there was a monster living at the bottom of the well, when in fact it was Jones' henchmen who pulled and tugged the children's legs as they ascended into the wall. So the mass suicide would make Jonestown notorious, which was rehearsed during white lights. In an affidavit, People's Temple defector Deborah Layton explained how they were rehearsed. Everyone, including the children, were to hold the line up and were passed down through the line and were given a small glass of wet liquid to drink. We were told that the liquid contained poison, that we would die within 45 minutes. We all did as we were told, and at the same, while the time came, we saw when we should have dropped dead. Reverend Jones explained that the poison was not real, and he had been doing this as a loyalty test. He warned us that not far would it become necessary for us to die by our own hands. So, what about the investigation now? Well, on November 14th of 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan, a Democrat from San Francisco, flew to Guyana along with a team of 18 people consisting of government officials, media representatives, and media, and members of the group concerned relatives of the People's Temple. The group included Ryan, his legal advisor Jackie Spear, Neville Annaborn, representing Guyana's Ministry of Information, Richard Dreyer, Deputy Chief of Missions of the U.S. Embassy to Guyana at Georgetown, who some believe have been a CIA agent. Reporters Tim Retterman, San Francisco Herald-Examiner, Don Harris, NBC, Greg Robertson, Steve Sung, Bob Flick, Charles Krause, Ron Havers, Bob Brown, and concerned relative representatives Anthony Casares, Jim Cobb, and Carolyn Houston Bird. Ryan and others attended to investigate allegations of the human rights that were violated from the People's Temple and held against their will for the individuals of the passport that was confiscated by mass suicide. Rehearsals were being conducted and 7 attempted defectors were killed. From the time Ryan and the others arrived at midnight in Georgetown, the capital city of Guyana, Before Wednesday the 15th, there were signs that things would not run smoothly. Previously booked hotel rooms were occupied, and the group had found other lodgings in the days that followed. Jones' lawyers in Georgetown, Mark Lane and Charles Gary, refused to allow Ryan's party to access Jonestown. During his stay at Georgetown, Ryan visited the temple headquarters at a large house called La Maya Gardens. At the rear patio, Ryan spoke with the temple members, Laura Johnson, Cole, and others, who she showed them around the house first floor. Ryan asked to speak to Jones by radio, but Sharon Amos, the highest-ranking temple member present, advised Ryan that his present visit was unscheduled. Members recalled Ryan as an unlikable man who had a bad cold. So, what about his visit to Jonestown? Well, by the late morning of Friday, November 17th, Ryan informed Lane and Gary that he would leave for Jonestown at 2:30 regardless of Jones' schedule or willingness. Ryan's party did so at roughly that time, accompanied by Lane and Gary, to the Port Katuma airstrip, 10 kilometers from Jonestown, some hours later. Only Ryan and 3 others were initially accepted into Jonestown, but the rest were allowed in after sunset. It was later reported and verified by audio tapes recovered from the investigation that Jones had ran rehearsals and to receive Ryan's delegation to convince them to be happy. That everyone was happy and in good spirits. On the night of Ryan's arrival, there was a reception and concert for the Ryan's delegation. Temple members were carefully selected by Jones to accompany the visitors to individual vigils around the compound. Some were angry and saw the congressman as trouble from the outside, when many went on to their usual routines. Two People's Temple members, Vernon Ghazi and Monica Bagby, made the first move by defection that night. Ghazi passed a note on Ron Harris reading, "Vernon Ghazi and Monica Bagby, please help us get out of Georgetown." That night, Ryan's delegation, Ryan, Speyer, Dreyer, and Alamo, stayed in Georgetown. The entire press corps and the members of concerned relatives were told they had to find the combinations, and soon they went to Fort Katuma, stayed at a small cafe. In the early morning of November 18th, more than a dozen temple members sensed danger enough to walk out colony toward Matthew Ridge in the opposite direction at the airstrip of Port Katuma. These defectors included 5 members of the Evans family, and Leslie Wilson and her 2 sons were killed in the Jonestown security. Later, when the reporters of concerned relatives had arrived, Marceline Jones and his wife Jim Jones gave a tour of the settlement for visiting reporters. This was to dispute all small I can't talk, y'all. Dormitory buildings where elderly black female temple members were living. The windows and the doors were all shut, and the Jones loyalists accused the press of being racist and trying to invade their privacy of the elderly women. The journalists replied that they wanted to know about the living conditions. Jim Jones woke late in the morning of November 18th, and NBC crews handed him Vernon Ghazi's note. Jones was angry and believed that those who wanted to leave the community would lie to destroy Jonestown. Jones had many temple members, and the People Temple saw them as family and the right to stay together. Then 2 families stepped forward and asked to be escorted out of Jonestown by Ryan's delegation. They were the Parks and the Bogue family, along with Christopher O'Neill, Harold Codell, and who who were partners of the women in two families. Cordell would lose 14 family members, ages 2 to 76, in the evening during the poisonings. The Vogues will lose their daughter Marilee, age 18, and Gosney will lose his son Mark, age 5. Jones was angry, and even though other members and visitors told him it was actually a compliment that out of the thousand, a few dozen wished to leave, Jones then gave them permission to leave, with some money in their passports, and Jones also told them that they would be welcome back any time. That afternoon, they were very long negotiations under the pavilion, during which Jones was upset by the news that Evans and Wilson's families had defected on foot. While negotiations proceeded under the pavilion, some of the emotional scenes developed between the families. Al Simon, an Amerindian member of the People's Temple, walked toward Ryan with two of his small children and asked to go back with them to the U.S., but his wife Bonnie was summoned on the loudspeaker by Jones' staff, and she loudly denounced her husband. Another famous scene also took place between Maria Casares, a Jones staff member, and her brother Anthony. He pleaded with her to return to the U.S. and consult with their family, but she was bitterly rejected his suggestion. Maria pulled off her gold necklace, threw it at her brother, and cursed him as defectors were leaving. Well, that is part 1, guys. Let me know what y'all think. I am curious. Just give me your commentary so far. Remember to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Actually, guys, I was wrong. So that was all of this one. So this is not going to be a series. I'm okay with that. But here we are. That was Don't Drink the Kool-Aid with Jim Jones. My name is Breezy. This is the True Crime Lounge. I will see y'all next time.